A cold breeze followed Daniel Carter as he stepped through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant. The air inside was thick with the scent of seared steak, warm bread, and aged wine, a familiar fragrance that once filled him with pride. Now, dressed in a worn-out coat with scuffed shoes, he walked in as an outsider, unnoticed, unimportant. It was precisely how he wanted it. The dim glow of chandeliers cast long shadows over polished tables, each one adorned with crisp white cloth and flickering candles. A quiet murmur of conversation filled the space, interrupted only by the occasional clinking of silverware. It was an upscale setting, refined yet inviting, the very atmosphere he had envisioned when he founded the Carter's Table restaurant chain. A young hostess stood behind a wooden podium near the entrance, her manicured fingers tapping idly against the surface. She barely glanced up as Daniel approached. Her name tag read Tina. "Good evening," he said, keeping his voice even. Tina's eyes flicked up, scanning him from head to toe. Her polite smile faltered for the briefest moment before returning, but there was something hollow about it. "Welcome to Carter's Table," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" Daniel knew this particular location accepted walk-ins. He had designed it that way. "No," he replied, "but I was hoping to get a table for one." Tina's fingers paused against the podium. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked tonight." Daniel's gaze shifted beyond her to the dining area. Several empty tables sat untouched, linen napkins folded neatly, wine glasses sparkling under the chandelier's glow. He counted at least 5. "Really?" He raised an eyebrow. "It looks like you have a few open spots." Tina's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. "Those are reserved. Our policy requires reservations in advance." A couple entered behind him, their presence immediately acknowledged. The man wore a tailored suit, his partner draped in a designer dress that shimmered under the soft lighting. Before they could even speak, Tina greeted them with a warmth she hadn't extended to Daniel. "Good evening, Mr. Reynolds," she said smoothly. "Your table is ready." The couple was guided inside without hesitation. Daniel remained at the podium, watching as they were seated at one of the reserved tables. His fingers curled slightly at his sides, but he kept his expression neutral. He had encountered bias before, but seeing it play out so blatantly within his own establishment burned in a way he hadn't expected. He turned back to Tina, whose pleasant expression had thinned into something more impatient. "What about the bar?" Daniel asked. "Can I sit there?" She hesitated. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, but he caught it. "The bar is also full," she said, though she didn't glance in that direction to check. A waiter passed by, balancing a tray of wine glasses. His uniform was crisp, but there was something tense about his posture, like he had been holding his breath since Daniel walked in. Their eyes met briefly before the young man looked away. His name tag read James. Daniel took a slow breath. He wasn't here to cause a scene. He was here to observe, to understand. "I see," he murmured. He turned, intending to leave, but a voice stopped him. "That's odd," said an elderly woman seated near the entrance. "I see plenty of open tables." Mrs. Hargrove, a long-time patron. Daniel had met her several times before, though she didn't recognize him now in his current attire. She peered over her glasses at Tina, waiting for an explanation. Tina stiffened but quickly composed herself. "Our policy must have changed recently," Mrs. Hargrove cut in, her tone light but sharp. "Because I've never needed a reservation before." A muscle twitched in Tina's jaw. Daniel watched the exchange with quiet interest. He wasn't the only one who had noticed. Before Tina could respond, another waiter approached. This one moved with an air of confidence, the kind that came with authority. Not the managerial kind, but the entitled kind. His uniform was just as crisp as James, but his eyes held none of the uncertainty. His name tag read Mark. "What's going on?" Mark asked, his gaze landing on Daniel before flicking to Tina. "This gentleman was just leaving," Tina replied quickly. Daniel said nothing. Mark smirked, barely concealing his amusement. "Figured as much." His gaze swept over Daniel's coat, his worn shoes, his unassuming stance. Probably for the best. We have standards to maintain. Something inside Daniel coiled tight. James, the young waiter, shifted uncomfortably nearby. His hands clenched briefly before he forced them to relax. He wasn't in a position to challenge Mark, but the conflict was written across his face. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had heard enough. With deliberate movements, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his wallet. He slid a sleek, black card onto the podium. "Charge the most expensive meal on the menu to this," he said. Tina blinked. "Excuse me." "I'll take it to go," Daniel said casually. "Since I can't sit down, of course." Mark scoffed. "That card's probably fake." Mrs. Hargrove chuckled from her table. "I'd be careful if I were you, young man." Mark turned to her, his smirk unwavering. "Why's that?" She gave him a knowing look but said nothing. Tina hesitated, glancing at the card. There was no mistaking the name embossed on it. Daniel Carter. Silence settled over the small group. James' eyes widened slightly, realization dawning in them first. He looked between Daniel, the card, and the now pale expressions on Tina and Mark's faces. Daniel took his wallet back, slipping the card inside. Then, with measured calm, he met their stunned gazes. "I'll be going now," he said. "But I'll be back." He turned and walked toward the door, the weight of their silence pressing against his back. As he reached for the handle, he heard a chair scrape against the floor. "Sir," James' voice called hesitantly. Daniel paused but didn't turn around. "I think you should know something," James continued, his voice lower now, as if afraid of being overheard. "About how things are run here when you're not around." Daniel let those words settle, let them add to the fire already burning in his chest. Then, without another word, he stepped out into the night. The cold night air did little to cool the fire burning in Daniel's chest as he stepped away from the restaurant. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. He had come here to observe, to understand, but now he had something more, a reason to act. He wasn't just an unseen owner discovering flaws in his business. He was a man who had just been dismissed from his own establishment, rejected not by accident but by design. That changed everything. Behind him, the glass door swung open. Footsteps hurried to catch up. Daniel slowed but didn't turn, letting the hesitant voice reach him first. "Sir, wait." "James." Daniel stopped beneath the glow of a street lamp. He could hear the uncertainty in the young man's voice, the battle between obligation and conscience. When he finally turned, James was standing a few steps away, shifting his weight uncomfortably. His hands were curled into fists at his sides, as if holding something back. "I don't want to get in trouble," James started, glancing back at the restaurant. Through the windows, Daniel could see Mark laughing with another server, their postures relaxed, as if nothing had happened. Tina stood near the hostess stand, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The moment Daniel had walked out, they had gone back to business as usual. James looked back at him. "But this isn't right." Daniel studied him for a moment, then motioned to a nearby bench. "Talk to me." James hesitated, then sat down beside him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of traffic filled the silence. James exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together. "I started working here 6 months ago," he said finally. "At first, it seemed great. Good pay, nice restaurant. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. Who got seated first? Who got the best service? Who didn't?" Daniel remained quiet, letting him speak. "It's like there's an unspoken rule," James continued. "If you look like you belong, fancy clothes, expensive jewelry, the right kind of attitude, you get treated like royalty. If you don't, well, you saw what happens." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Tina and Mark aren't the only ones," James admitted. "It's the way things run here. The way Mr. Lawson runs things." Daniel's eyes darkened at the name. Lawson. The restaurant's general manager. Someone Daniel had personally vetted before trusting with this location. Someone who had clearly failed him. Does he know what happened tonight? James let out a humorless laugh. Are you kidding? He encourages it. His expression turned bitter. He calls it keeping the restaurant's image. Says we have to be selective about who we let in, that the wrong kind of customer could ruin the experience for others. Daniel's fingers curled slightly. He had spent years building this restaurant chain on the foundation of good food, great service, and inclusivity. And yet here was Lawson, turning it into an exclusive club for the privileged. Why didn't you say anything before? James flinched at the question. I wanted to. He looked down at his hands, ashamed. But I need this job. I have bills to pay, and Lawson, he doesn't just fire people. He ruins them. If he thinks you're trouble, good luck finding work anywhere else in town. Daniel absorbed this, his gaze drifting back to the restaurant. Inside, everything continued as if nothing had happened. Mark poured a drink at the bar, laughing with customers who fit the mold. Tina smoothed her dress, her polished smile returning for the right clientele. And Lawson, he would be here soon, wouldn't he? Someone must have called him. Daniel stood. Go back inside, he told James. Act normal. Don't let them know we spoke. James hesitated. What are you going to do? Daniel's expression was unreadable. Find out exactly how deep this rot goes. James swallowed but nodded. Without another word, he turned and walked back toward the restaurant, shoulders tense. Daniel waited until he disappeared inside before following at a slower pace. This time, when he stepped through the doors, he wasn't just an observer. He was a reckoning. The atmosphere hadn't changed. Laughter and conversation drifted through the space, the scent of roasted meat and fine wine clinging to the air. But as Daniel stepped forward, something did shift, the energy. Tina spotted him first. Her eyes widened slightly before she quickly masked it with feigned politeness. Sir, I told you that you were full, Daniel finished for her. I know. He glanced toward the bar, where Mark was mid-pour. And yet, here I am. Mark's brow furrowed as he set the bottle down. Didn't take the hint the first time? Daniel ignored him. His attention was on the man emerging from the back office, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. Lawson. The general manager was a man of calculated charm. His salt-and-pepper hair was slicked back, his face set in an easy smile that rarely met his eyes. He was the kind of man who could turn an insult into a compliment, who knew exactly how to make someone feel both welcome and unwelcome at the same time. As his gaze landed on Daniel, the smile remained, but his eyes sharpened. What seems to be the problem? Lawson's voice was smooth, practiced. Tina started to speak, but Daniel beat her to it. The problem, he said evenly, is that I was turned away from my own restaurant. A flicker of confusion passed over Lawson's face, but he recovered quickly. I see. You must be mistaken. This establishment is owned by Daniel Carter, Daniel finished, pulling out his wallet once more. This time, he didn't offer his card. Instead, he pulled out his ID and held it up for all to see. Silence. Tina's breath hitched. Mark's smirk disappeared. James, standing off to the side, looked ready to bolt. Even Mrs. Hargrove, watching from her table, arched an amused brow. Lawson's expression didn't falter, but Daniel caught the way his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Well, Lawson said, slipping into a new persona almost effortlessly. Mr. Carter. This is certainly unexpected. Daniel pocketed his ID. Is it? Lawson gestured toward the private dining area. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. Daniel didn't move. No. A pause. A flicker of unease passed through the room. No. Lawson repeated, still playing the composed businessman. No, Daniel said again, voice carrying. Because this isn't a private matter, is it? He looked toward Tina. You turned me away because of how I looked. Then to Mark. You mocked me for my clothes. Finally, to Lawson. And you, apparently, encourage this kind of discrimination. A few murmurs spread through the restaurant. Patrons who had been blissfully unaware moments ago were now listening closely. Lawson's smile thinned. "Mr. Carter, I assure you, this is all a misunderstanding." "Is it?" Daniel crossed his arms. "Then tell me, Lawson, how many others have you turned away? How many customers have been refused service because they didn't fit the image you want?" Lawson's silence was answer enough. Daniel let it linger before speaking again, his voice calm but unyielding. "I built this restaurant to be a place of welcome. A place where everyone, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or how much money they have, is treated with dignity." He leveled a hard stare at Lawson. "And you turned it into something ugly." Tina and Mark were visibly shaken now. James, for the first time, looked hopeful. Lawson, however, only sighed. "Mr. Carter," he said, "if you're unhappy with the way things are run here, we can discuss adjustments. There's no need for dramatics." Daniel smiled. "Oh, there won't be dramatics." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "There will be consequences." And with that, he turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Lawson, Tina, and Mark to stare after him in stunned silence. Outside, the night air was crisp against his skin. But this time, it felt invigorating. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next evening, Daniel returned, not as a stranger, but as the owner. He entered through the front doors with measured steps, his posture calm but commanding. There was no disguise this time, no hidden agenda. The staff, the guests, even the air in the restaurant seemed to react to his presence, shifting with an unspoken tension. Lawson was there, standing by the bar, his suit pristine, his expression unreadable. The moment he saw Daniel, he straightened, plastering on that well-rehearsed smile, but his eyes betrayed the tightness of a man who knew the storm had arrived. Tina froze behind the hostess stand. Her manicured fingers twitched over the reservation book, but for once, no words escaped her. Mark, wiping down a glass, gripped it just a little too hard. James, stationed near the back, stood at attention, as if bracing for whatever came next. Daniel let the silence stretch, taking in every detail of the space. He had built this restaurant from the ground up, invested his time, his money, his passion into it. And yet, it had been tainted under his own nose. The realization still burned, but tonight wasn't about anger. Tonight was about setting things right. Without a word, he walked past Tina, past the bar, past the nervous glances of the staff. He reached the center of the dining area, where a few patrons had begun to take notice. Mrs. Hargrove, seated at her usual spot, smirked behind her wine glass. Others murmured, sensing the weight in the air. Finally, he turned to face the staff. "Close the doors." Tina flinched. "Sir, you heard me." His voice was calm but absolute. "No new guests. Anyone already dining may stay, but from this moment on, service is paused." Mark hesitated. We can't just stop service." "We can," Daniel cut in. "And we will." A few guests exchanged curious looks, but no one protested. Slowly, the doors were closed, the outside world shut out. The quiet that followed was thick, heavy with expectation. Daniel turned to face his employees. "Last night, I walked into this restaurant, the one I built, and was told I didn't belong." His gaze swept over them, steady and unyielding. "I was turned away, not because we were full, but because of how I looked." Tina's face paled. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "That wasn't just an insult," Daniel continued. "It was a failure. A failure of everything this restaurant was meant to stand for. And it wasn't just Tina or Mark. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a culture that was allowed to fester." His eyes met Lawson's. "A culture you encouraged." Lawson held his ground, but Daniel saw the twitch in his jaw. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset." Daniel took a step closer. "Upset? No. I'm disappointed." He let the weight of the words sink in. "Disappointed that I trusted you with my business. Disappointed that instead of building something welcoming, you built an illusion of exclusivity, of arrogance. He shook his head. You thought you were curating an image, but all you did was poison the very thing that made this place great. Lawson's mouth pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. Daniel turned to the rest of the staff. So here's how this is going to go. Lawson, you're fired. The room seemed to exhale. Lawson stiffened, then let out a small, disbelieving laugh. You can't be serious. Daniel raised a brow. Do I look like I'm joking? Silence. For the first time, Lawson's composure cracked. You can't just... I can, Daniel interrupted. And I have. Collect your things and leave. Lawson's nostrils flared. He cast a quick glance around the room, as if searching for an ally. No one met his gaze. Mark and Tina looked away. James held his chin a little higher. Realizing he had no leverage, Lawson scoffed, shaking his head. This place will fall apart without me. Daniel simply smiled. We'll manage. Lawson's expression darkened, but he knew better than to push further. With a sharp exhale, he turned on his heel and strode toward the back office, the sound of his footsteps heavy against the polished floor. As soon as the door shut behind him, Daniel refocused on the remaining staff. Tina. Mark. His tone was steady, unreadable. They straightened, eyes darting toward him. You should consider yourselves lucky, he said, because you're getting one more chance. One. Mark swallowed hard. Tina opened her mouth, then closed it, nodding stiffly. But things are changing, Daniel continued. Starting now, this restaurant is going back to what it was meant to be, a place where everyone is welcome. Where service is based on respect, not judgment. He met each gaze with unwavering certainty. If anyone has a problem with that, you're free to leave. No one moved. Good, Daniel said. Then let's start fresh. A breath of relief passed through the room. The tension eased, shoulders loosened. James, standing near the back, allowed the smallest smile to break through. Daniel exhaled, then turned to the guests still seated. He offered a slight nod. Apologies for the disruption, he said, his tone lighter now. But some lessons can't wait. Mrs. Hargrove chuckled into her wine. A few guests clapped quietly. With that, the doors were reopened, service resumed, and the restaurant, finally, began to feel like it belonged to Daniel once more. And this time, it belonged to everyone.